Okay, this is chapter 13 of Understanding Communication, Understanding Human Communication for the oral communication class at Shelton State Community College, Chapter 13 is on organization and support. Speaking of organizing and supporting a speech that you're going to give, it talks about structuring your speech first. The basic structure that has been around for many, many years is introduction, body, conclusion. And the old saying is to tell the audience what you're going to say, tell them, and then remind them of what you told them. And that's introduction, body, conclusion. You will want to start with a working outline. It's a construction tool used to map out your speech. Sometimes it's called a topic proposal. Sometimes it's called a working outline. As you start to develop your speech and it becomes more formal, you develop what's called a formal outline or a full sentence outline. You want to follow the basic speech structure, introduction, body, conclusion, and then you also want to follow Roman numeral 1, capital A, number 1, small letter A, and etc. as you go down through there. And we'll talk more about some of that in a little bit. You then want to take all that you have, all this information that you've done and research, and you want to narrow it down to a speaking outline, keywords that remind you of what it is that you want to say. Some principles of outlining. We talked about the standard symbols already. Standard format, indentation is important. Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2 will be on the same level on the page. Capital A, capital B will be indented by around a half an inch in that area. It talks about the rule of division. We never have 1 without 2. We never have A without B. If all we have is A beneath something, it's really just an explanation of whatever's above it. And the other thing is that we never have an and in any one point. Otherwise, we have 2 points. The rule of parallel wording. This will help you out in terms of developing a speech outline. For the full sentence outline, it's all full sentences. But when you're developing your speech outline, it will actually help you follow your speech and follow your notes if you follow the principle of parallel wording. So if Roman numeral 1 is a phrase, Roman numeral 2 is a phrase. Or if Roman numeral 1 is a single word, Roman numeral 2 is a single word. If A is a full sentence, then B is a full sentence, and you just follow that throughout your outline. Organizing your outline into a logical pattern. There's a time pattern when you talk about past, present, and future. And the space pattern, you might talk about points on a compass. The book talks about Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, the Great Lakes. Topical patterns, covering different areas of a subject. And that's one of the most common forms of organizational outlines, by the way. When we get into persuasive speaking, we sometimes talk about problem solution patterns. Here's a problem, and here's the solution. If you agree that it's a problem and you agree that my solution will solve the problem, then you will tend to have to agree with my speech. Although, today and age political world and the debates and the way people discuss things, not necessarily. Anyway, cause and effect. If this is the cause of whatever it is, and we agree that it's a problem, if this is the cause and it's causing this effect, and we agree that this effect is a problem, then we have to agree we have to get rid of the cause. At least you would think we would. That's sort of the norm. But that's another very powerful way to do a persuasive speech. Monroe's motivated sequence. You draw attention to your topic. You then establish that there is a need that needs to be fulfilled. The satisfaction step proposes a solution, a way to fill that need, to satisfy that need, if you will. The visualization step then describes the results of the solution. It asks the audience to imagine things being better. That's the visualization step. And then the final step is the action step, where you have a direct appeal to the audience to do something, to take action in regard to the topic. Going forward in this chapter talks about beginnings, endings, and transitions. And I'll tell you this now, the introduction is one of the most important parts of any speech. If you start giving your speech and you don't have our attention, your speech is not going to be effective. You can have the most persuasive argument anyone ever had. And if no one is listening, no one got persuaded. I describe this as basketball. Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, a good shot, Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, any basketball, whoever the great shooters are. No basketball player, even the greatest of all time, ever scored a point, ever scored a basket without the ball in their hands. The ball can't make a shot. If you don't have the attention of the audience, you will not persuade the audience, or you will not inform the audience. Whatever it is you are planning to do, it won't happen. So the introduction is extremely, extremely important. One of the primary purposes of the introduction is to get the audience's attention. Another is to potentially, and sometimes it's usually good to do this. There are occasions where it might not be done for specific reasons. Preview the main points, set the mood and the tone for your speech, demonstrate the importance of your topic to your audience. This is very important. An audience comes and to listen to your speech, and essentially we're asking, how does this affect me? That's not a selfish thing. It's a natural thing. We want to know how what it is you're going to say impacts our lives, affects our lives. Establishing credibility is a good thing we can do in the introduction. In getting people's attention, though, there's a checklist. Different ways to capture the audience's attention. You can refer to the audience. You can refer to the occasion. And some of you did that in your speech tribute, where you'd actually discuss the difficulty of narrowing it down from 2 or 3 people, maybe to just one person, for your speech tribute. You can refer to the relationship between the audience and the subject. I actually had a student one time who talked about, so many of you did a speech tribute about your mom. That was really great. I happen to have chose my dad. I certainly admire my mom as well, and then launched into the speech about their dad. And the same thing, other people like that. They brought the audience into the speech by referring to things that the audience had just done. Refer to something familiar to the audience. You might cite a startling fact or opinion, but you do have to be careful about that. A startling fact or opinion can be good unless it's so startling that the audience is now thinking about that and not listening to you. Anyway. You can ask a question. There are 3 different types of questions you can ask. You can ask a rhetorical question, saying, okay, don't you think it would be better for the world to be more peaceful? Well, who's going to say that's not true? That's sort of a given. Don't you think it would be great for our country to be more prosperous? Well, yeah. Those are rhetorical questions. They're not real questions. They're just rhetorical. They're done for the purpose of persuasion. You can ask a genuine question. You have actually had students who ask for a show of hands. How many of you would like to know, or how many of you would like to have this happen in your life, whatever it may be, and the students all raise their hands. You can also ask a question where you ask a specific person in the audience a question. However, if you do that, I would strongly recommend that you talk to the person ahead of time and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Would you mind me asking you a question? So do that, though. Tell a story. Make sure you know how long the story is. Had a young man get up to give a speech. He read the introductory story, and as he read the introductory story, the timer and I have a timer that shows the time to the students typically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At the end of 7 minutes, he finished the story. He looked up and he said, "Has it really been 7 minutes?" Her whole class went, "Yeah." And he picked up everything he had on the lecture and he starts walking away saying, "Well, I was going to talk about this," and he sat down. Know how long the story is. Know how long the story is. You can use a quotation, and you can also tell an appropriate joke or use appropriate humor. That's very, very dicey, though. I'll tell you this now. You want 2 things. It needs to be clean. It needs to be not offensive to anybody, not done at anybody's expense, no group, no person. And it needs to be appropriate to the place. And it needs to be funny. I had a student who sort of told a joke and didn't go over. He spent the next 2 to 3 minutes trying to explain to the class why the joke was funny. Now, about halfway through the speech, hasn't started his topic yet. That's problematic. The conclusion is also important because we leave the audience with something to think about. Some principles to have a good conclusion. One is don't end abruptly. Don't just say, "Well, I'm done," and walk off. Don't ramble either. Don't bring in new material. Don't apologize. It's really amazing how many students get to the end of the speech and they feel like that's the time to confess. I had a student who got done with the speech. He said, "Well, I'm sorry about this speech. I only started working on it last night." We knew that. We could kind of tell it was a last minute speech. I even had one who said they started working on it that morning and it was an 8 o'clock class. Okay. Don't do that either. Don't apologize. And the different kinds of ways that you can conclude a speech, a lot of them are the same as attracting the audience's attention. You can leave with a quotation. You can tell a story. You can, different things that you've done, you can do at the end as well. Like that. Some don't work. You don't do a startling fact or opinion and walk away. Then we're sitting there going, well, wait a minute. What was that about? So be careful on that. It talks about supporting materials, the functions of supporting materials. Oh, sorry, it talks about transitions next. You want to help us move from one point to the other. And if you're going to use points, number one, number two, number three, that's fine. But don't switch horses in midstream. Don't go 1, 2. And I've seen this. Number one, number two, C. Wait a minute, we were on 1 and 2. But far more common, by the way, is not switching horses, although I've seen it done, is number one, number two, da da da. Number four, wait a minute, I was listening for 3 and didn't hear it. Problematic. Don't do that. And so, supporting material, different functions of supporting material. One is to clarify. Of course, in a persuasive speech, it is to prove. Supporting material should also make your material interesting, and it should make it memorable. Different types of supporting material. You can define what something is. And when we define something, oftentimes, if it's a debate or an argument in some way, the person who establishes the definition wins the argument or wins the debate, so to speak. Examples are very powerful, especially in speeches of persuasion. We can use actual examples, factual examples. We can always use hypothetical examples. Now, you don't want to pretend to be using a factual example. And I had a student who did this. Got us emotionally involved with the people that he was talking about. And then at the end of this, what seemed to be a factual example said, well, now that was just a hypothetical example. And I'm not kidding. Every student in the class folded their arms, leaned back in their chair, and started looking at each other like, okay, well, we're done listening to this speech now. Don't do that. Don't do that. Statistics can be powerful. 2 or 3, don't go more than that. You reach 4 or 5 statistics in a speech, and everyone's eyes just sort of gloss over, and you've lost your audience, and that's problematic. 2 or 3, preferably 1 or 2, no more than 3. You can use analogies where you compare and contrast 2 different things. I've had students who compared and contrasted, for instance, gun laws in different countries compared to the United States and why we should either have or not have more gun control. I've had speeches about the drinking age and the idea of getting rid of the drinking age, comparing the rate of alcoholism in the United States to other countries where the rate of alcoholism is lower, who have no drinking age laws. And that's the argument that was created. You can use stories to reinforce a point. Stories are very powerful. Quotations or testimony, where we actually have expert testimony or peer testimony, or even prestige testimony, because someone that we highly think of, maybe they're not an expert, but if we think highly of them, their testimony doesn't matter. Much about different styles of support. Narration, you're telling a story and you're bringing in material into that. Citation, you're citing various proof and giving the name of the person. According to Dr. Jim Smith, the leading neurosurgeon at Boston Medical University, da 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 da. Well, if that person genuinely is that, then what they have to say about whatever the topic is probably has something to say that we want to listen to. And so it's a very important thing. There are a lot of different kinds of research that you can do. Students are rather amazing in sort of the creative research and the statistics and the support that they bring. They're constantly surprising me in many ways. And so I will look forward to your speeches of persuasion or your informative speeches as we go forward. That is the chapter on support.